All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really specific, super common, and frankly, deeply exhausting paradox. We're diving headfirst into why the absolute most capable people, the ones holding the whole shebang together for everyone else, often struggle the absolute hardest to just ask for a little help themselves. Okay, so if you're tuning into this, there's a really good chance you've got a drawer full of well-worn tools somewhere in your house. And I don't mean those cute, decorative, perfect-looking toolkits. No, I mean the ones with dried caulk on the handles, the rubber grips totally worn down to the bare metal, and honestly, maybe a little blood from that one DIY project you completely refuse to talk about. You know exactly how to use them, and you use them all the time. Look, we've designed this explainer specifically as a guide for those of you out there experiencing that quiet, heavy burnout that comes from excessive self-reliance. We're going to decode exactly why you do this, and more importantly, how to gently find your way out.
So to really wrap our heads around the psychology of the fixer, we first need to take a hard look at the reality of your day-to-day life. You are the person, right? The one everyone naturally turns to when things completely hit the fan. You're the friend diagnosing a weird car noise before anyone else in the passenger seat even realizes there's a sound. You're the one figuring out how to bleed a radiator with a flashlight literally clenched in your teeth at midnight. And then you fix it, it works, and you tell absolutely nobody. Because, well, why would you? You take on those 2 a.m. panic calls and those I literally don't know who else to talk to moments exactly the same way you tackle everything else, without hesitation, without needing a single round of applause, and never ever making it feel like it cost you a thing, even when it absolutely does.
But here's where we hit a massive wall. Why is it that when your back genuinely gives out mid-job trying to haul a heavy washing machine, a task that, let's be real, obviously requires 2 human beings, you'll just stand there? You'll spend 4 solid minutes doing mental gymnastics, calculating how to finish the job all by yourself, instead of just walking into the next room and saying, hey, can I get a hand? Why does this extreme competence suddenly turn into intense isolation the exact minute you're the one in a bind? There is this huge, profound gap between how this looks from the outside and how it actually feels on the inside. I mean, most people look at this hyper-independence and they just assume it's pure stubbornness, right? Or maybe an inflated ego. They think you just genuinely believe you can do it better than anyone else. But the inward reality, the actual reason, it's way less flattering and just so much more human. The resistance isn't ego at all. It's this deep-seated, almost physical allergic reaction to visibly being the person who can't do something. It is a profound, deep discomfort with the vulnerability of simply not knowing the answer.
See, over the years, you've meticulously constructed what psychologists call an internal story. It's this quiet, running narrative built entirely on a foundation of pure competence. Your whole identity, your literal value in the world, is basically organized around not needing to call anyone, while always being the number other people dial. So inside that specific story, the mere thought of asking for help, it doesn't just feel like a minor inconvenience. No way. It feels like this massive, destabilizing crack in your very foundation. It actually feels like losing a piece of who you are.
And this doesn't just pop out of nowhere. For a specific kind of person, this usually starts pretty early on. At some point in your childhood, you probably reached out for help, but the help just didn't quite reach back. Maybe it was a parent who was just incredibly stretched too thin to notice, or maybe you grew up in a household where needing things felt like adding dead weight to an already heavy pile. So even as a little kid, you clocked that, and you adapted. You became the kid who just figured it out. The tricky part is, adaptations formed in childhood. They don't just magically dissolve when you pay your first mortgage. They harden. They become the permanent shape of your adult personality.
There is this incredibly powerful quote that I think just hits the nail on the head here. Asking requires sitting for a moment in the experience of not knowing. Man, think about that. Because your whole sense of self relies so heavily on being the capable one, needing help forces you to step totally out of that familiar armor. It demands that you sit right there in that highly uncomfortable, incredibly vulnerable space of visibly being the person without a plan. And you've spent your entire life conditioning yourself to run away from that specific discomfort as fast as humanly possible.
Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, I don't ask for help because people will just say no anyway. But the data tells a completely different story. Look at this fascinating 2008 psychological study by Flynn and Lake. They actually tracked people asking for assistance, and participants predicted vastly lower compliance rates than what actually happened in reality. The actual compliance was remarkably high. People consistently, and I mean vastly, underestimate how willing others actually are to step up and help them. The world around you is significantly more willing to support you than your internal story will ever let you believe.
So, the absolutely crucial takeaway here is this. The research proves the barrier isn't that the world won't help you.
The problem really isn't availability. People are perfectly happy to lend a hand. The real barrier is the heavy internal cost and the brutal self-judgment you inflict on yourself when you consider what needing help implies. You aren't calculating if someone will say yes or no, you are weighing what it means about your own worth if you need them to say yes. And that judgment, it just keeps returning an answer you absolutely cannot accept.
And listen, this hyper-independence extends way beyond fixing physical things like washing machines. It totally dominates your emotional life too. As the stable one in a crisis, you absorb everyone else's panic, right? And you instantly convert it into an actionable plan. But when it's your turn, you deflect. You find receiving emotional support awkwardly intolerable. Like, if someone tries to actually sit with you in something hard, you'll problem-solve your way out of the conversation before they even finish their sentence. Saying, "I'm fine, I've thought through it, here's what I'll do," is just so much easier. Fixing your feelings alone just feels cleaner to you than being held by someone else.
Underneath all of that deflecting and all of that planning, there's this deeply rooted question dictating every move you make. Is needing help a burden? For a fixer, the answer is just a flat yes, always. You operate on this quiet, almost pre-verbal belief that showing up with empty hands and a visible problem means you are actively taking something away from someone else. You feel like leaning on someone is this special privilege that belongs strictly to other people, but never, ever to you.
Which brings us to the absolute most devastating irony of being the fixer. Just think for a second about how you view helping others. You see it as a privilege, don't you? You show up with your tools, both literal and emotional, and you leave things so much better than you found them. You would never, ever make someone feel like a burden for asking you for help. Honestly, you'd probably be genuinely offended if they even suggested you would. And yet, you are stubbornly, sincerely convinced that you would be a massive burden if you asked them for the exact same grace.
If your chest is feeling a little tight right now, well, then you know exactly why the standard advice completely and totally fails you. Just ask for help. We see it everywhere. But if you are battling burnout from intense self-reliance, that superficial advice is practically insulting. Telling a fixer to just ask for help is exactly as useless as telling someone who is terrified of heights to simply look down and relax. It completely ignores the massive physiological panic response triggered by the action. It is not a skill issue, it's a core identity issue. The actual path out of this burnout, it's slower, it's stranger, and it requires a few very specific steps. First off, you genuinely have to update that internal story. You have to realize that needing something doesn't dismantle your worth as a human. Second, you have to practice sitting with that incredibly foreign, highly uncomfortable feeling of needing something without immediately rushing to fix it yourself. And finally, you have to take action by occasionally handing someone else the wrench. It literally means letting the people in your life do what they actually want to do, which is support you.
Because you're a fixer, abstract theory just isn't going to cut it for you. You need actionable, low-stakes ways to practice this stuff. So there are specific 7-day guides and planners designed exactly for this. They're linked down in the explainer description. And they focus on tackling mental overload, managing overthinking, and learning how to properly reset day by day. Making a tiny, super low-stakes request, like, asking a colleague to quickly read over an email or asking your partner to grab dinner, is like doing a physical rep at the gym. It's an actionable way to prove to your brain that the world doesn't spontaneously combust when you aren't carrying absolutely everything alone.
Now, what is absolutely crucial to remember as you start shifting this behavior is this. Updating your story does not erase your identity. That drawer full of worn-down tools, it is still yours. The 2 a.m. calls, the quiet repairs, the amazing, almost magical ability you have to absorb stress so others don't have to, none of that stops being real. You aren't losing your superpowers here. You are still the highly capable person who fixes things. You're just expanding the definition of who you are allowed to be. You're simply giving yourself permission, finally, to not have to do it all alone every single time. You can be the fixer, for sure, and you can still occasionally hand someone else the wrench. Thank you so much for listening to this explainer. We really hope it helps ease some of that quiet burnout and gives you a fresh perspective on your own self-reliance. Please make sure to check out our other explainers for more deep dive into the psychology behind how we live and work. Until next time, I want to leave you with one thought to carry into your day. Look around you. Who will you hand the wrench to today?